Okay, Masechet Sukkah Daf Chet, and what a daf it is. We have two main topics. First of all, around Sukkah, we're going to have lots of calculations. I hope you remember your high school geometry. And the second topic on Amud Bet is going to be about huts that people build for other reasons. Can one use them for a Sukkah? So we begin. I want to show you the outline of the first part of the Sukkah here first. We're going to have a statement by Rabbi Yohanan, the second generation Amorah from Eretz Yisrael, the most important Amorah in Eretz Yisrael, in fact. And he's going to say a statement that we're going to have to try to figure out. And we're going to see four different explanations of it in order to figure out his calculation. And we're going to see the end. Actually, we don't get quite a satisfactory answer, but I'm going to try to revive what Rabbi Yohanan actually meant. So let's get right into it. Amar Rabbi Yohanan, Sukkah asuya kikibshan, im yesh behekefa kedei lesheb ba, 24 bnei adam keshera, ve'im lav pesula. A sukkah that's made like an oven. Ovens in those days were round structures. This is a big, giant oven. People didn't always have their own ovens. This would be like a professional baker's oven. And so you'd walk in there and put everything in. So these are, in fact, round. If there is behekefa, here it translates as circumference. We'll go with that translation for now. With enough room for 24 people to sit, then that sukkah is kasher. If not, it's pasul. Okay, what does this mean? The last thing we did on the previous stuff mentioned that a sukkah that is like a dovecote, a shovach, is no good because it has no corners. According to that, a round sukkah would not be good because it has no corners, no matter how big it is. But Rabbi Yohanan does not agree with that. He thinks a round sukkah is just fine. The problem is trying to figure out what's the minimum size for this round sukkah. And so here's what he says. The minimum size is for 24 people to be able to sit around its circumference. We're going to see in a second, we're going to assume that each person takes up 1 amah of space. It's a little tight, you got to squeeze, but you could do that if you're skinny enough. And so try it on yourself, 24 amot of a circumference. That is the smallest possible round sukkah. That is the statement of Rabbi Yohanan. Okay, so now we're going to analyze it. Keman kedebi damar kol sukkah she'en ba arba amot al arba amot pesula. It must be that Rabbi Yohanan is following the Tana Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, who said that if you have a square sukkah, the minimum is 4 by 4, rather than the other people who said 7 tefachim by 7 tefachim. The reason why we're going to go with Rabbi is because this is quite big, a 24 amah circumference, that can fit a lot in it. And so we're trying to figure out how the ratio of square, the minimum square, relates to the minimum circle round sukkah. And 24 is quite big. So let's try to find at least the biggest. We'll go with the biggest number we have for the square sukkah and at least make it work for that. Okay, so that's what we're going to follow this throughout the rest of the sukkah. And assume Rabbi Yohanan is agreeing with Rabbi. The minimum square sukkah is 4 by 4 amot. Now let's analyze it. Mikidi. Let's assume that a person is 1 amah wide and he can take up 1 amah of space. What is the relationship between the circumference of a circle and its diameter? Well, it's anything that has a circumference of 3 tefachim will have a diameter of 1 tefach. Here is the calculation of pi. You can find this calculation already in Tanakh, in the book of Kings, when it's describing the pool that Shlomo made that is round, and it says it was 30 amot around and 10 amot across. Okay, obviously this is a rounding off of the number, but truth is, because it is irrational, and even in ancient times they knew it was irrational, any number that you use is going to be a rounding off. So if you round it off to 1 decimal or 100 decimals, still rounding off. It's good enough when you're building something that is this size. Okay, so if now that we know that, we say, well, let's calculate b'teresar sageh. Then really 12 should be enough. In other words, if you have get a picture here. If you have a sukkah that is 4 by 4, so imagine this is 4 by 4, so that means right each side is 4. So and you made a circle. We're not right now. We're assuming it's inside. The circle will be inside, and so that circle would have a diameter of 4 amot. That would mean that the circumference would be 4 times pi, or 4 times 3. That's 12. So if we want the sides to equal, or the side to equal the diameter, then 12 would be enough. So this can't be a good explanation of Rabbi Yohanan, who said 24. It just doesn't match up. So that's try number 1. Try number 2. Did I skip anything? Very good. Oh, wait a second. This is when you say that the circumference is going to be 12, that would be if it is round. But for a square, it's more, right? The circumference of that square is 16, right? 4 times 4 sides is 16. So instead of comparing one side of the square with the diameter of the circle, let's make 2 shapes that have the same circumference. That would be both 16. So mikidi kama meruba yoter al ha'igul rebiya b'shitzar sageh. How much more is the circumference of a square than a circle inside of it? It's a quarter bigger. That's true. And so if this is 12 inside here, and we wanted to make a circle with a circumference of 12, so that a circumference that's the same as the circumference of the square, then we would make it 16 also. And here's a picture of that, right? This is a picture of a square and a circle that have the same circumference. And that would, that could be reasonable. That how would you compare the minimum? What's the minimum and the minimum? Same circumference, right? It'd be reasonable to do that. The problem is that this doesn't work for Rabbi Yohanan because it's still only 16, and Rabbi Yohanan said 24. So this is no good. Okay, just notice in this picture a second that at some points the circle is beyond the square, and at the corners the square is beyond the circle. Okay, that'll be important for the third reason, the third explanation. So, but everything we said before is talking about igul, a circle that's inside the migot, inside a square. But if it's a square that literally comes from inside or is inside a circle, then you need more. So very good. So see, we need to try to get up to 24 of Rabbi Yohanan. So it must be that the circle is not inside, but we want to match it up with the circle outside. And then you would need more because of the corners that project out. In the picture I just showed you, you saw how they project out. So let's analyze that. A square that's inside a circle. Mikidi kol ameta beriboa ameta utre chumsha be'alachsona b'shibsar neche chumsha sagya. So, but that doesn't quite work either, because every amah in the square is going to be an amah and 2/5. So this is the square root of 2, right? Remember the Pythagorean hypothesis here. It's no longer hypothesis. I think it's been proven. I don't know why we still call it hypothesis. But okay, if we assume the side, let's call it a of a square, right? So a squared plus b squared is going to be c squared. So that will actually be the square root of 2 times a. Square root of 2 is also irrational. We're just going to use 1.4 for it. So we get here 1.4 times the side. And if we do that, we get 1.4 times the side is times 5 is 5.6. And it'll be 3 times 5.6, which is going to give us 16.8. And so we have 16.8, but that still is not quite 24. So this doesn't work either. So we try to say, lodak, Rabbi Yohanan, he was not being exact. He was not being precise. He was giving a round number. I know it's 16.8. He said 24. Okay, the Talmud doesn't accept that. Okay, you can say you want to round off. You could say a little bit within a half. But you don't go from 16.8 to 24, right? I mean, nobody would want to do business with Rabbi Yohanan if he did that, right? He'd sell you, 24 pounds of fish, and I only got 16.8. He says, I averaged off. So that cannot work either. So therefore, we abandon this line of reasoning, and that there's one person per amah. So just to review the three choices, right? The Rabbi Yohanan said around Sukkah has to have a circumference of 24 people equals amot. That's what we were assuming. And if we equate the sides, you only get 12. If you equate perimeters, you get 16. If you take the circle outside the square, then you're going to get 16.8. And all of these are way less than 24, so they all are no good. So the second possibility is we're going to assume that 2/3 of a person can fit in each amah. And in that way, Rabbi Yohanan didn't say 24, he meant 16, right? 2/3 of 24 is 16. So let's see if that can work. Amar le mor keshisha bered Rav Chisda le Rav Asher. Mi severat gabra be'ameta yativ. Is each person one amah? No. Telata gabre betarte amah yatve. 3 people can fit into 2 amot. They squeeze a little bit more. Okay, it's like a subway. Kama havu lehu shitzar. So how many amot altogether for that circumference? 16. So see, doesn't that work? Anan shipsar nechechum shaba. No, it does not work because we need 17 minus a fifth, or 16.8. And you said 16. So you could say, lodak. All right, he was rounding down. He really needs 16.8. He just said 16. Well, we're still not happy with that. You can say, you can round off lechumra and say it has to be a little bit bigger, right? So round off, if it's supposed to be 16.8, round off to 17 and add a little bit. No harm in adding a little bit, but you can't round off down for leniency, because then I'm going to follow Rabbi Yohanan. I'm going to make a round sukkah that's 16, and it's going to be pasul because it's not big enough. I need 16.8. So this is not sufficient. This does not work. And so we reject possibility number 2. And now for 3, we're going to go back to the assumption before that there's 1 person per amah. But now we're going to assume that the people are not sitting on the inside, but on the outside. And for this, let's look at this fun chart. It's a fun picture. Okay, so you see they're not on the inside like they were in here. I love this picture, by the way. It reminds me of those rides that spin around and you stick to the side of it, right? But rather, we're talking about that they are on the outside. Now, we're going to further assume that each person is not only an amah wide, but also an amah in length. If you stick your arm out, well, and your legs sitting, then you are an amah. This is, business class on El Al. So if assuming that, and we still have that 24 that Rabbi Yohanan talked about. So that Rabbi Yohanan 24 is the perimeter outside of the chairs. So if each person is 1 amah long, so then you take away 1 amah on the left and 1 amah on the right, and then you get, instead of this is if it's 24 amot in the perimeter all around, the diameter from the chair to end of the chair is going to be 8. But take away 2 for 1 guy over here and 1 guy over here, and now you have a diameter of the sukkah that's inside them would be 6. 6 times 3, 18. Okay, let's read that inside. Amar le Rav Asi le Rav Asher. I'm going to go back to say each person is 1 amah wide. But Rabbi Yohanan mekom gabre la kachashiv. Rabbi Yohanan was saying the perimeter as 24 people. He wasn't talking about the area of he was not including the space where the people are. It was inside the circle of the people. this is all a little strange, right? I mean, it's like a very confusing way to speak if Rabbi Yohanan really means that. Why is he even talking about people? Why not just say this many amot is the circumference? We have to get back to that. Anyway, let's see if this works. Kama havu lehu timane sere. So you get 18. Bishibsar neche chumsha sagya. But all we need is 16.8. But this is okay. Even though it's really 16.8, he was not so precise. He rounded up to 18. High, a nice number. And so it's not precise. So this is a possible answer, certainly better than the first two answers. And so we're good with this. I mean, I'm not so happy with it. It doesn't really sound like Rabbi Yohanan meant it. But this is the third answer. And now we're going to get to the fourth answer, which is in the name of the judges of Caesarea, or Rabbanan. The Caesarea Amre la Dayane de Caesarea, the rabbis or the judges of Caesarea Amre. This is what they say. Igula denafek migo ribu'a rib'a. They're giving general ratios. And if you have the ratio of a circle that's inside a square is a quarter. By that they mean you would take whatever that circle is, and you see here we're assuming circumference. This is how it was understood by everyone. That the circumference of a circle, subtract a quarter, and you'll get the circumference of the square that's inside. Okay, and that's not actually relevant for us, even though that's true. That's a true fact. And here's the one that we need. Palga. If you have a square inside a circle, then its perimeter is a ratio of a half, which means basically that the square would be 2/3 of the circle. Right, the square inside would be, or you could say otherwise, the circle is 1.5 times the square. If you take the square and cut it in half and add it to itself, you get the perimeter of the circle. Now that is not true. The perimeter of a circle around a square is just a little bit bigger than the actual one. It's here, I have this calculation here. So this is what the judge of Caesarea said. The circle and the square is a ratio of 3:4. That's true because a circle is 3a. This is a, right? So the circle inside the square is this one, right? If you have a, that's the diameter is a, 3a. And the square is 4a, that's the side of it 4 times. So that's true. But the circle and the square, we can make a calculation. The square is actually going to be 4 times a, right? That's the perimeter of the square. The circle is 1.4 times a times 3, right? 1.4 times a, because you need the square root of 2. To get the hypotenus. So 1.4 times a is the hypotenus times 3, which is pi, and you get 4.2. So you see actually the ratio of a square inside a circle is 4 to 4.2, not 1 to 1.5. So the judge of Caesarea, we don't know how they got this. This is not correct. If it were correct, it would explain Rabbi Yohanan, because if the square is 1, then the circle surrounding it would be 1.5 times that. So since we know the square is 16, 1.5 times 16 is 24, right? So theoretically, the statement of the judge of Caesarea would explain Rabbi Yochanan's calculation. The problem is it's completely wrong. So here's the end of the sugya. Velohi. This is not said by the sages of Caesarea. This is said by the editors of the Gemara. They said this is not true because we look at it, we tried it out, we drew it, and we see that it is not that much. It is much less. And that is the conclusion of this sugya. So this is quite strange, really, that we have 4 answers. 1 and 2 are completely rejected. 3, we have to really work on saying these people are not sitting inside the sukkah, they're sitting outside and take away, and really comes to 18. Okay, 16.8, rounding up to 18. Very difficult. And then it brings judges of Caesarea, but their calculation is completely wrong. So this is very strange. Okay, however, I have an answer. I didn't come up with it, but rather this is a rabbi who wrote a commentary on Eruvin, not here, but in the parallel sugya. It's a commentary called Geon Yaakov, Rabbi Yaakov Kahana, who wrote around 1800 and said as follows. This statement of the judges of Caesarea, they weren't talking about perimeter, they were actually talking about area. And if you think about area, it works. So let's see, both sides, parts of their statement work. First of all, they said a circle inside a square has an area ratio of 3 to 4. Let's see, a circle inside a square. What's the area of a circle? Well, if A is one of the sides, so the area of a circle is pi r squared. So we have to take half of A times squared times 3. Half of A squared is going to be, we could take out the half times a half as a quarter, right? So that's 3 times a quarter, that's 3/4, times A squared. So that's 3/4 of A squared is the area of the circle. How about the square? That's just A squared, right? So there you go, 3/4 A squared is the circle compared to A squared. So that's a ratio of 3/4. So that's very interesting that in this picture, the circle inside the square, the ratio is 3/4, both for the perimeter and for the area. That's pretty cool. See, you learn everything in Daf Yomi. Okay, how about the other one? How about the square inside the circle? Well, let's see. The circle, let's start with the square. The square is going to be a area. The square has, if the side is A, then the area is A squared. That's it, simple. Okay, which in this case would be 4A. If it's 4, okay, A squared. And the circle is, we're going to take 1.4 times A, that's the hypotenus of the square, which is also the diameter. So 1.4 times A, and we need to, oh, here it is, right? 1.4 times A, and we need to take half of that actually, because we need the radius. Okay, so the radius, if we take 1.4 and divide it by half, we get 0.7. So 0.7 is the radius times A squared. Well, we could take, and all that times pi, right? Pi r squared, 3 times 0.7 times A squared. 0.7, we'll take that by itself, times 0.7 is 0.49, which is actually a half. Actually, it is exactly a half, because if you take the square root of 2 divided by 2 and square that, you just get half, a quarter, you get a quarter. So that's 3/4 times A squared. So there you go. A square is the area of the square is A squared. The area of the circle is 3/4 of A squared. So you see the ratio is, is A squared. Other one is 3 over half of A squared, half. Right, sorry. Right, 0.7 times 0.7 is half. So 3/2 of A squared. Right, the circle is bigger, quite a bit bigger than the square, and that is a ratio of 1.5. So amazingly, the judges of Caesarea said something that is absolutely correct. They're talking about areas. And now, since they are brought here to explain the Rabbi Yohanan, so Rabbi Yohanan makes perfect sense also. We're talking about this, and we're talking about not perimeter, but area. He never said anything about perimeter. He said if there is behekefa within the circle, 24 people can sit. Why do you talk about people rather than amot? Talking about people sitting is a way of saying a square amah, right? He was trying to be as clear as possible, right? So we're not talking about people all around. So rather, if you have a circle that can fit 24 people, meaning 24 square amot, that is the minimum size of a circle. And so where did he get that? Well, he got it from here. He wants the area to be equivalent. An area, he wants an area of a circle that would circumscribe a square. So a square that had 4 times 4, which is 16, can fit inside a circle that has 24 square amot. And that is perfect, makes perfect sense. That's exactly what we're talking about. Rabbi Yohanan is saying you need the minimum 4x4, and it has to be a full by 4x4. You can make a circle around Sukkah if you want, but it has to fit a 4x4 in its area. And so we have something really fantastic here, which is that the judges of Caesarea perfectly explained Rabbi Yohanan. Okay, so now just a point about methodology, which is that this is kind of why some people don't like academic study of Talmud, because sometimes we see that the last editor of the Gemara did not fully understand a statement of the Amorah in the Gemara itself. So it's kind of irreverent for us. In this case, we have the Gaon Yaakov to say it 200 years ago. So it's not us saying it, but it's somewhat irreverent to say the editors of the Talmud didn't understand the Amorah statement of the Amoraim. Okay, that has a point. However, I think it's also irreverent for against the judges of Caesarea and Rabbi Yohanan to say, oh, they said something and that didn't make any sense, right? So we're actually coming and we're helping out. It's true, we're saying that the editors of the Gemara did not fully understand it because it was quoted out of context and he didn't say area or perimeter specifically. But now we can really come and save the judges of Caesarea and save the statement of Rabbi Yohanan and give a great explanation to it. And I think we have to give thanks and gratitude to the editors of the Gemara that even though they didn't understand the statement of the judges of Caesarea and they said it doesn't make sense, nevertheless, they didn't erase it, they didn't change the words, they preserved it and memorized it exactly as is so that we can come today and reconstruct it and put it back together. But you see how they really did know their geometry. Okay, question.
Yeah, so this is one opinion about the minimum size of a sukkah, right? One opinion is Rabbi that says 4x4, but we have other opinions, which is that the sukkah can be as small as your body and your table.
Correct. So if you follow that, then I guess we would use the same methodology and we would figure out what is a circle that can circumscribe a 7x7 tefach square.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Very cool. All right. So that was quite amazing. The rest of the sukkah should be easy compared to this. Amar Rabbi Levi mishum Rabbi Meir shete sukkot shel yoserim zo lifnei mizo penimit enah sukkah vechayevet b'mezuzah v'chisona sukkah upetura min mezuzah. So you have a craftsman, a potter or something, and this is how he lives. He has two sukkahs, one within the other. In the inner one, that's where he lives. And the outer one, that's where he works and shows off. That's his display room. That's his store. So you have one within the other. And the law is that the inside one requires, the inside one cannot be used as a sukkah because he lives there all the time. And you have to make sure that the 7 days of Sukkot, you do something that's different. You don't live in the same place that you always live. You have to leave your usual place, even if it's technically as chachaner as a kosher sukkah. Furthermore, it's chayav mezuzah, the inside one, because you live there, right? And that's your dwelling. The outside area it can be used as a sukkah because you don't usually live there. So you're doing something different that shows you're celebrating the holiday, and you do not require a mezuzah because it's a temporary dwelling. We don't put mezuzot on our sukkahs. Okay, so that's a good statement. Hold on, why not? We know the laws of mezuzah are that if you have an entryway to your house, let's say like an enclosed porch or foyer or something like that, you have to put a mezuzah. This is actually relevant. A lot of people have in front of their doorway, they'll have a covered area with poles around it to keep from the rain. And that does require a mezuzah, even though if you only had that structure, you wouldn't because you don't live there. But because it's an entryway to your house, it requires a mezuzah. So how come over here you don't require mezuzah? We answer mishum de la kebiyah, because it is not permanent. Rashi says that's talking about the inside, but it makes more sense according to Rambam. It's talking about the outside. The outside thing here is not permanent. He doesn't leave it up all the time. Sometimes, when he has with customers, he leaves it up. But maybe in the winter, he takes it down. This would be similar to a lot of restaurants have on the sidewalk. They put up these, plastic flimsy booths that people can eat there, put some extra tables during the winter. But in summer, they take them down. And so that, according to this, those would not require a mezuzah. They are not meant to be permanent. Okay, so that's an interesting case. Now, more cases of things that are put up for other reasons, right? Like this, that is put up as a storefront. Tenora banan, ganbach, ganbach. That is Rashi Tevot for Sukkot Goyim. The Gimel is Goyim. So a sukkah, a hut that a non-Jew makes. He made it just for himself. to to have shade, wherever he made it, and then you see it and you analyze it and say, has kosher schach, has kosher walls, and I'm going to use it on the holiday. Is that permitted? Sukkot nashim, women, they're not making it for the chiyuv because they're not chayav, but they make a hut to hang out in. Sukkot behema, a hut to protect animals. Sukkot kutim, a sukkah of kutim. This probably actually means a sukkah, right? That Samaritans make as a sukkah. This is fascinating. Samaritans have been around since the times of the first Bet HaMikdash through the whole second, and there's still a few around. Here's a Samaritan holding his Torah. They have the same 5 books of Moses as we have, more or less. They made some changes in theirs, but their cases open up 3-ply, which is really cool. They are not technically Jews. They don't want to be Jews. We don't consider them Jews either, because they're not from the south, from the Judeans. They are remnant of the northern tribes mixed with other people, and so they keep the 5 books of Moses, but nothing from Nevi'im, Ketuvim, and certainly not Torah Sheba'al Peh. So they do have sukkahs. If you go visit a Samaritan today, you can find him on Sukkot. You will find his sukkah looks like this. Is an actual picture of a Samaritan sukkah. And you see, they make it out of fruit, and they put also leaves on top. They make their sukkot out of the arba minim. Because in the Pasukim it says, take 4 minim, and then the next Pasuk says, make sukkot. So they take that literally, and they make sukkot out of the arba minim. You see here is that their sukkahs, his sukkahs inside his living room, under the roof. Okay, now we would not consider this a kosher sukkah. Why do they do that? Why don't they go outside? The answer is that about 1,500 years ago, the Samaritans were persecuted, and when people would, if they would make a sukkah outside, then that would bring upon them persecution. Also, people would steal their fruits and things like that. So they decided that they have to change and they have to bring their sukkah inside. And from then until today, they make their sukkah inside. However, during the times of the Tanaim, when this Braita was said, it seems that the Samaritans made their sukkot outside. And if they make it, according to the same regulations that we do, even if they put fruit there or whatever, however they make it, but if it fits the criteria, are you allowed to actually use it? The answer is yes. Sukkah mikol makom, any type of hut that someone makes for whatever reason, keshera, it's good, as long as the sechach is a kahalacha, right? According to all the standards that we said before, more sun than shade, and so on, more shade than sun. Okay, good. So now we're going to wonder about this braita. How come it adds in mikol makom, right? That's extra words. Why does it say those extra words? So, wait, first, my kelcheta, what does it mean? The last line that it says you have to make the schach has to be kelcheta. Has to be made for shade. It doesn't have to be made for a sukkat mitzvah. If a non-Jew is doing it, if you're making it for your animals, they're not chayavim in mitzvah of sukkah. But as long as you're making it for shade, that fits into the definition of sukkah, which is schach, that's there to provide shade, as opposed to if you're making it as a storage room or something like that. So as long as they made it for shade, you can use it, even if they didn't make it specifically for a sukkat mitzvah. Now those words, mikol makom, la'tuyemai, what other cases are they talking about besides the 4 that it mentioned? La'tuyeh sukkat rakbash, to add in 4 other types of sukkot that are indicated by this acronym. The tenor banan, sukkat rakbash, sukkat ro'im. The resh stands for resh, a sukkah that's used by shepherds. Sukkat kayasim, a sukkah of fig dryers. They have to sit all day and watch the figs and make sure birds don't take them, thieves don't take them. Sukkat burganin, sukkah of city guardsmen. Sukkat shomrei perot, sukkah of people watching their fruit on the trees. Sukkah mikom, or maybe drying out. Sukkah mikom makom, any kind. Keshera, they're all fine. So you see, this baraita has the same 2 caveats, right, as the first one, but it gives another list. So when it says mikom makom in the first baraita, it's an indication of the rakabash. Okay, good. Now, Michael Cheta, we asked the same question on the second baraita as we did on the first. The same thing. All these people that are making a sukkah for whatever, for the different reasons, you have to make sure that they are doing it in order to provide shade, and that is the definition of a sukkah. Now, mikol makom latu yemai. In the second braita, it also says, besides the 4 rakbash, it also adds mikol makom, any kind of sukkah. What is that coming to add? Latu yemai, latu sukat ganbach. So in the second beraita, the mikol makom is coming to include the ganbach, which is the list in the first one, right? This ganbach, goyim, nashim, behema, kutim. And the words mikol makom in the first beraita are coming to include rakbash in the second beraita. So therefore, no matter which beraita you have, everything's included. Each one points to the other in a circular way. This is like an Escher painting. You have the hand drawing another hand, which is drawing the first hand. Okay, anyway, Hai Tana de Ganbach, the Tana who taught it the first way with the Ganbach, Alim Ale Ganbach Mishum de Kebi'i. He wanted to talk about the Ganbach cases because those are permanent structures. You leave them there all year round to, for the animals, for the nashim that they would use it, right? So these are permanent structures, and that shows it's good, right? It's a nice, it's made well. We're assuming that making it well is better for a sukkah. And then he said, oh, by the way, even these other ones, the one for Ro'im and the guardsman, the fruit watcher, those are temporary structures. You put them up during the harvest season, and then you take them down. You don't leave them up all the time. But even though they are very flimsy structures, they're still okay for a sukkah. But he wanted to teach ganvach is the main thing he wanted to teach because they are stronger. They have a better case for them. So that's why he taught ganvach, and he only pointed to rakbash. Hana but the other, v'haitana de rakbash, alim ale rakbash, jebene chiyuvanin hu. So the second Tana, he wanted to specify rakbash because all these people, the herdsmen and the fruit watchers, we're assuming that they're Jewish men, and so they're all bnei chiyuv. They have to sit in a sukkah. So that it's more obvious that these cases would be a good sukkah since they built them and they're also chayavim b'mitzvah. So v'tana mikom makom le'tuye ganbach tela b'nei chiyuvanin hu. And then he added on, wait, don't think only these, even those other people like women and kutim and animals who are not chayavim in sukkah, but they make a sukkah for their own shade and benefit. They, nevertheless, those sukkot are still considered a sukkah. And that concludes the sugya. Tomorrow we begin with the next Mishnah, which is actually about sukkah yeshana. You see, it leads directly into this, about a sukkah that you made for some other reason, and you have to make it specifically as a sukkah mitzvah. Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen ve'amen.